We've all seen and heard advertisements. They usually interrupt our favorite programs, right? And we try to grab the remote and fast forward, or perhaps we even spend extra money so we can avoid the ads altogether. But now you're in a position where you're creating content, and one of the ways to make some money with your podcast is through advertisements. I'm not talking about promoting your own products and services. Yes, that could be considered an ad, but for this video, we're talking about working with outside advertisers, outside brands, and running promotions or ads for their products and services. There's different ways that you can work with advertisers. You can work directly with an advertiser where you're negotiating rates and you're going back and forth directly with an advertiser. You could be part of some sort of an affiliate program where you're not guaranteed money up front in order to do the ad, but you also have the possibility and the potential of making a lot of money for that, especially if it's a good fit for your audience. I never recommend running any kind of ads or promos on your show without really thinking about who your audience avatar is and would this be a good fit for them. But if you hit this right, this could be amazing for you. This could be the primary way that your show makes money. Here's a good example. Let's say that you have a business podcast and there is a piece of software that you absolutely love. In fact, you could not do your business if it were not for this piece of software. You need to develop an affiliate relationship with that company. And don't worry if they're not part of some sort of affiliate program. There's a ton out there, or they don't promote their affiliate program on their website. Reach out to the company. I've done this a couple different times where they didn't even have a program, and I said, I just love what you're doing. I would promote it no matter what. Can we work something out? Can you create something for me? Trust me, if they think that you can make a big difference in their business, they will work with you. And I love the idea of affiliate marketing too, because it allows you to kind of get your feet wet in this ad space. You could start doing affiliate ads from day one if you wanted to, because you don't have to prove your numbers because you're not guaranteeing a certain amount of people are going to hear it. Only if people purchase it do you make money on that. So you can start from day one. It's a great way for you to start getting experience, running your own ads, voicing your own copy, doing things like that, inserting it into your show, as well as your audience, because your audience has to get used to ads too. I remember when I first started some of my podcasts, I didn't have any advertisers. It was the first couple years before I had advertisers. Now you don't have to wait a couple years. This was a long time ago and there weren't that many people in the space, but I waited a while. And then when I started incorporating ads in my show, my audience was like, whoa, what's this? It's an ad. We're not used to seeing an ad in this podcast. If I had started earlier and if I started working with affiliates and bringing in money that way and creating ads for them, my audience wouldn't have been so shocked when I finally started doing ads. So that's one thing you can do. You can start doing affiliate ads right away. If you were planning to work directly with advertisers, you are going to make some good money from doing that, right? Especially if you do the negotiating and you're doing one-on-one as opposed to, going through some sort of agency to help you where they would take a cut. But most of those companies aren't really going to do many deals with podcasts that don't have at least 5,000 downloads per month. That's kind of the threshold, although I would say it's even getting higher than that. You may be more upwards of 10,000 downloads a month. But don't worry, like I said, there's other ways to incorporate ads. For example, if you are part of a podcast network, when we talked about podcast networks, one of the benefits of being part of a network is being able to be grouped together with other shows. So maybe you couldn't reach out to that advertiser, or the advertiser might not be interested in your show because you have less than 5,000. But when you combine your download numbers along with 4 other similar shows who all happen to be part of the same podcast network, well, suddenly you have the interest of that advertiser because together your downloads are over 20,000. And now you can do the deal. So doing things like this, you do have some flexibility. So don't worry about your numbers right now. I'm just trying to give you an overall picture of where the industry currently is. Sometimes your podcast host provider will also offer to sell ads for you, but I want you to be very careful of this because there are some traps you can fall into with this. You need to know if you have the ability to decline an advertiser, because some podcast host providers, they're really trying to appeal to the masses, right? Which makes sense for their business model, but they're willing to throw whatever on your show, whether or not it's a good fit for your audience. And you never want to do that. Trust me, the amount of money that you're going to make is not worth upsetting your audience. It's not worth losing that trust that you worked so hard to build with your audience. So make sure whatever company you're working with, whatever situation you have set up, make sure you always have the ability to approve an advertiser. If your podcast starts getting 5,000, 10,000 downloads per month and you decide you want to start working directly with advertisers, you can absolutely do that. You can do the research, you can reach out to them directly, send them your media kit or your one sheet, and you're off to the races. Hopefully they'll email you back and you can start negotiating. But if that seems a little too daunting, because I know many of you have jobs outside of podcasting, you've got lives, you've got families to take care of, another option is to work with an advertising agency that sells podcast ads for you. Now, I will say my personal experience with this was when I first started my podcast, for the first couple of years, I really didn't have any ads on my show. And then after that, I started getting some interest from advertisers and I started working one-on-one. But this took up so much of my time, you guys. And I don't really consider myself a salesperson. Like, I love my show and I could pitch my show all day long, but when it came to getting someone to sign on the dotted line, I really don't think that's my strong suit. So, it was kind of an uncomfortable situation for me, but I did what I could do. And then an advertising agency reached out to me and said, hey, we'd like to sell ads for you. Well, the first 4 or 5 companies that did that, I just ignored them because I really didn't feel like they had my interest, at heart. I really felt like they were just kind of out there and reaching out to every podcast and didn't really care about what I was doing. But when the right company came around, I started asking more questions and I decided to take the plunge. I decided to give them a percentage of the ads that they would bring in. So I didn't pay them anything up front, but only if they made a sale, they took 30% of that sale. And I got the rest. I got 70% of the ads. Now, I did have to do a little bit of work on my part. We're going to talk about that in a second. But I didn't have to do the part that was so difficult for me, writing ad spots and doing that kind of stuff. That was never a problem. I just didn't want to have to do the negotiating and trying to figure out rates and all that kind of stuff. I had bigger and better fish to fry. I wanted somebody else to handle that for me. That was a difficult decision to make. I remember going through the contract going, oh my gosh, am I signing away my soul? What is going on here? But it ended up being a really good starting point for me. Now, I learned some things through that experience, and when it came time to renew, I decided to pass on this. But I didn't start selling ads myself. I hired another company. I realized the first company was a little bit too big and I kind of got lost in the shuffle. So I opted to go with more of a boutique agency. And that has been one of the best decisions that I've made for my business. I totally trust them. They totally get my content. They introduce me to the right advertisers. And I personally have no problem giving them a portion of the proceeds of the profit because I don't have to do that work. That would take me time, and time is money. So you really have to think about what you're good at. And if you don't want to go through the whole process of selling ads and doing things like that, I highly recommend doing your research and finding an ad agency that's a good fit for your show. Now let's talk a little bit about how this whole ad process works. If you decide to incorporate outside ads into your show, what should you expect? And every situation is a little bit different, but here are the basics. What's going to happen is you're going to sign some sort of contract or have some sort of standards, right? Some expectations. And then usually the advertiser is going to send you some bullet points or ad copy. Really, in podcasting, the standard is that the podcast host writes their own copy, or if you have a producer or someone but someone from the actual podcast writes the ad spot. So that's a little bit of extra work on your part. They're going to send you some information, some bullet points, and you're going to have to create the ad spot. You do have some guidelines to work with. Usually it's been predetermined if this is going to be a 30-second ad or a 60-second ad. And usually there's some sort of call to action that you have to put in the ad, right? Usually some sort of promo code or a link that people have to go to so you get credit. We go back to that return on investment, right? The advertiser wants good return on investment, and you've got to somehow prove, in most cases, that they heard your ad and they took some sort of action as a result of hearing your ad, right? They move towards some sort of purchase. So you create this ad spot, you put it into your show, whether you bake it into your show, you edit it into your show, you record it live, or you use dynamic insertion where you've got a little bit more flexibility and you can drop an ad in and take it out whenever you want. But it's your responsibility to put it into your show. And then depending on how strict the advertiser is, most of them do want some sort of proof afterward that you reached whatever it is you were supposed to reach. So if it were a certain amount of downloads, that's usually what it is, downloads or impressions, a certain amount of people heard the ad, they may want you to take a screenshot so they can see how many downloads that episode got or how many downloads your podcast got for the entire month. As long as you've reached your goals, you send out an invoice and you can expect to get paid within a few months, give or take. It really depends on the company you're working with. If you start working with really big brands, this gets a little confusing, right? And it gets a little tedious because the big brands are working with their own ad agencies, which may be working with a media buyer. There may be like 3 or 4 people until the money actually gets to you. So this could take, I've had it take upwards of 6 months, 9 months for an advertiser to pay. Now that's not what you put on your invoice. You said 30 days or less, right, on your invoice. But just keep in mind, it may sound really glamorous to work with a big brand, but the more, the bigger brands you start working with, the more people are involved, and it may take you longer to get your money. Now, I had the exact opposite happen. When I had my first big sponsor, oh my goodness, I was so excited when I landed this sponsor. I went to a convention, I went to an expo, and I met this person at a booth. They had a family business, and it was focused on the maternity tanks, breastfeeding tanks, and things like that. I happen to have a breastfeeding podcast. It was a perfect fit. And even at the expo, I ended up interviewing them, so they had a chance to kind of work with me a little bit just because I loved their product. They ended up calling me, asking me for a media kit. I sent them my media kit, which had all my rates and everything in it. They bought a 6-month sponsorship deal with me, which was $16,000, and they renewed it a couple different times. That was my first big sponsor. And it was a great working relationship. It was amazing. So really, when it comes to working with advertisers, every advertiser is different. Your experience you have with a big brand is going to be way different than the experience you have with a mom or pop store. You have to determine what's going to work best for you.